People from Ceará are free and can choose whichever candidate they want, because that's how we believe in democracy. Unlike Ciro's allies who supported the January 8th coup, calling for the return of the military dictatorship. It's shameful for me to see Ciro Gomes embracing those who called for a coup in a democratic country like Brazil.
How has this dispute with Ciro Gomes been in your state?
So, of course, we can say that today Ciro Gomes is a fifth columnist of what we usually talk about in politics. He is a fifth columnist for Bolsonarism in Brazil. His candidacy basically aims to try to diminish Lula's political and electoral strength. Here, Fabiola, the dispute you are facing is with a candidate who decided to take a different path in his political life. He has a history in the progressive camp and already in 2024 decided to betray the Democratic camp and support the Bolsonaro's candidacy in the race for the mayor's office of Fortaleza. We had a very tight race in Fortaleza between the PT and the IPL candidate, a clearly Bolsonaro's federal deputy, and Ciro Gomes and his group in the second round. In the first round, Ciro Gomes' candidate for mayor got 11% of the votes. It's an absolutely failed administration. There's a lack of food in the hospital. Patients don't have enough to eat. They closed hospitals in the city. They dismantled the entire mental health policy in the city, and their candidate didn't make it to the second round. And in the second round, to our surprise, Ciro Gomes and his group went to support the Bolsonaro-aligned candidate named André Fernandes, who is known in our state as a leading figure in hardline Bolsonarism. And now, in the election for state governor, he forms an alliance in which the senator on his ticket is someone who became a pastor and said he prayed for Lula to die. The other one was Bolsonaro's candidate in the elections for governor, whom I ran against in 2022. So Ciro is now the Bolsonaro movement's candidate in Ceará, and we are very confident that we will defeat Bolsonarism and its allies once again. In Ceará, they won't succeed. We will have an overwhelming majority in favor of Lula in Ceará, and we will win the election in Ceará.
Candidato,
To ensure the continuity of our project.
He really goes after you, right? With very harsh words. He says that you are very weak, that you have no authority. He says you don't even have the ability. How do you respond to these attacks? He was even your ally before.
He was my ally, and he used to say that Camilo Santana was the best governor in the history of Ceará, until the day Camilo didn't give in to his whims. Since then, Camilo, for him, is the worst person in the world. He is the person who used to say that Lula was the greatest president of Brazil. Now he says that Lula is the head of a criminal organization. He is the person who has been convicted of gender-based political violence against a senator. So I can't take seriously someone who has more than 70 lawsuits who doesn't respect anyone. Because when someone is his ally, that person has no flaws. When someone doesn't submit to his whims, that person only has flaws in his eyes. So I can't take seriously someone with that kind of attitude. For the people of Ceará, what matters, in my opinion, is not the opinion he has about me. I can't expect praise from my opponent, especially from someone who handles political discussions in this way.
As you said, Ciro Gomes took a different path, right? Although he criticizes Bolsonaro, Bolsonaro's son, he's allied with the PL, which is Bolsonaro's party. I even saw a recent interview of his with Veja magazine renewing the criticisms. But what I wanted to ask you objectively is that Lula got almost 70% of the votes in Ceará in the last election. And Bolsonaro got something around 30%. Most likely Lula will prevail again over Flávio Bolsonaro in your state, Ceará. How do you explain that with so much appreciation from the people of Ceará for Lula, for the Workers' Party? You are running against Ciro Gomes, who, as you said, changed course, but is still an extremely competitive candidate. It's a tight election. How do you explain that Lula is way up there and you are at risk of not renewing your mandate? Why doesn't Lula's vote share translate into the polling numbers for you?
In my humble opinion, Josias, the polls also show that more than 70% of the electorate isn't even discussing the election. A large part of our electorate still thinks that Ciro is an ally of Lula. part of our people think that Ciro is still in the progressive camp. They don't know what he's been saying out there because people don't follow this political debate. This will happen now, during the election. Because in the Fortaleza election, which I mentioned in 2024, he didn't show up. He stayed hidden, supporting Bolsonaro's candidate, and put his vice, who is the former mayor of Fortaleza, to campaign on the streets for the Bolsonaro's candidate. Now he's showing up, so now it will be clear which side he's really on. What are the proposals he doesn't have to develop the state of Ceará? The level of ignorance he has about Ceará today is clear, about what we've accomplished in education and health. So we're going to the debate, and then in the debate, I think things will change significantly so we can build our victory in the first round.
But Governor, you yourself said a little while ago that Bolsonarism 2 years ago, in 2004, came very close to winning the election. And also for the mayor's office of Fortaleza, right, with a difference of about 10,000 votes. The right also won in other important cities in Ceará, like Juazeiro do Norte, for example. How do you see this advance of the right, especially in the major urban centers of Ceará? Do you think that your administration in some way failed to meet the expectations of this part of the population?
I think that every government always has things that can be improved and perfected. That's part of any administration. The government makes good decisions and makes mistakes. Our government, in my opinion, has had far more successes than mistakes. Now, we had a resounding victory in our alliance in Ceará. Out of 184 municipalities, we have allies in 178 municipalities in Ceará. The mayor of Juazeiro was re-elected. We didn't lose the election. We didn't lose the mayor's office in Juazeiro. The mayor was actually re-elected. And we won. In the vast majority of municipalities where we lost, we practically tied in the election. So we have here a set of very significant achievements, including partnerships with the municipalities. There isn't a single municipality in the state of Ceará that doesn't have a significant project, that doesn't have improvements in social policies, that doesn't have partnerships with the municipalities, including municipalities whose mayors are in opposition parties. Here we have a public-minded approach. There are policies that are absolutely universal. They happen in all municipalities. Full-time schools in all municipalities. Mais Infância card for all municipalities. Ceará Sem Fome, which helped lift 400,000 people from Ceará out of extreme poverty in these 3.5 years. So we have here policies that are very well coordinated with our municipalities, and I believe it will continue like this in the next period. So we are very confident that the result that happened in 2024 was very favorable. Also, a detail about Fortaleza is that in Fortaleza, Bolsonaro even reached 40. So Bolsonaro's candidate got something around that in the first round. In the second round, Ciro's group joined forces with Bolsonarism, and we turned around 400,000 votes in 15 days. So it was a very extraordinary victory. Fortaleza is the only capital governed by the Workers' Party. It's Fortaleza. And it has been carrying out an administration that is reorganizing the city and restoring public services to the population.
Well, you were talking, right, about how voters get confused regarding Ciro Gomes' support for Lula and everything else. So how is this vote going to play out in the state? It draws attention. In fact, there's a report today on our UL page, Governor, talking about donations. I find that very interesting. Ciro Gomes received 1 million in donations from the Grandeni brothers. And this draws attention as news today because this donation shows a change in this family's support. That's a good example, isn't it? I think we can use this as an example too. Regarding the voter, how they get confused when faced with a historical PT ally like Ciro Gomes was, but who changed sides recently, as you mentioned, how do you explain that? These family members donated to you in your last election, and now they've decided to support Ciro Gomes. Why lose that support? Does this hurt your campaign? How do you see this change?
It doesn't hurt at all. I have a very positive relationship with the business sector in Ceará. The Federation of Industries of Ceará is our partner. The Federation of Agriculture of Ceará is our partner. The Federation of Commerce of Ceará is our partner in carrying out projects together and developing projects together. And I have a very positive relationship with Pedro Greden of maintaining all our projects, the expansion of Bradeni there in Crato, which we carried out last year. And sometimes the businessman wants to support more than one candidacy. So it happens that Pedro helps both. Ciro's candidacy and our candidacy. And I think that's part of it. It's part of the political game. It's part of the relationship that business people often want to have with political forces, but they have a positive relationship with all of them. But on my part, I always maintain deep respect, even for the businessman who politically supports the other side. My duty as governor is to have an institutional, non-partisan relationship, because that's how it should be. In Ceará, there's no place anymore for persecuting a businessman or anyone just because they don't support the governor's party. I don't want that with the mayor, with the businessman, or with any citizen.
Governor, I wanted to talk a little about the movement that has started to emerge, especially in cities in the interior of Ceará. Yes, it's a movement led by your opponents, in some cases even by people connected to the PT, which is this split ticket movement. Lula nationally and Ciro locally, right? It's an attempt to separate the national vote from the state vote, isn't it? I'd like to know how you see this movement, how you see figures from the Workers' Party itself joining this movement. And do you think that Ciro, who has a political history as an ally of your group, can manage to win over these voters there?
Look, I think this will be one of the important topics of our campaign, because in Ceará you actually have two candidacies, in the national election and in the state election, with greater intensity on the streets and in the polls. You have Lula's candidacy and you have our candidacy, which has Ciro Gomes as my candidate for senator and Luiziane, former mayor, as my candidate for senator. And you have Flávio Bolsonaro and Silvio's candidacy for governor, which has two senators. Both are Bolsonaro supporters. Bolsonaro's candidate for governor and a staunch Bolsonaro supporter, which is Alcides. So I have the impression that when the debate happens, when the campaign that's starting now gets going, this will become clearer. And a comrade or another who gets lost along the way. Look, I've been in the PT for 40 years. In these 40 years, I've learned that there are people who abandon the struggle along the way, either because their personal ambitions weren't fulfilled or because of personal frustration. We learn to live with that. I'm not going to disrespect anyone here. I'm still on good terms with those I was with in the PT. I've already called them comrades in my life. And I don't do what my opponent does. If someone isn't with me now, I start speaking badly about them. I hope they can be happy and keep moving forward. But effectively what we're talking about is that we have 184 municipalities here. There aren't even 5 cases of our comrades who have left. And in fact, comrades with little influence in local politics. No, but I want to maintain my respect, my camaraderie. I learned that we need to have generosity and maturity so we can move forward with serenity, because that's not what matters to the people of Ceará. And that's what I'm working for.
You made a statement about teachers' salaries, right? That the majority weren't earning 14,000 reais and so on. There was a complaint from the union. But anyway, do you intend to increase the salaries of state teachers? What will the pay floor be? What is the promise for improving teachers' salaries?
Fabiola, I get this pressure at home too. My mother, Elma, is 90 years old and is a retired state teacher. I am very proud to be the son of a retired state teacher. And I think that Ceará must have one of the best, according to the union movement, the best career and salary plan in the country. In Ceará, a teacher hired through a civil service exam starts with a salary of 7,100 reais. If he gets a master's and a doctorate, he can retire with more than 21,000 reais. This is the salary of a public school teacher hired through a civil service exam in the state of Ceará. And therefore, I am committed to maintaining the value of this plan. And that recognizes teachers as the main people responsible, along with our administrators, for the results of education in the state of Ceará. So look, my mother was a teacher, now retired. Her whole life, back in Ciro's time, she earned minimum wage. Her whole life. And with our project, which started with Sid, with Camilo, and now with me, it starts at 7,100 and tops out at more than 20,000 reais. This is the change we made to attract the best teachers to our public school system. Ceará's state school system has more than 600 PhDs, doutores. There are more than 3,000 teachers with a master's degree. And there are more than 8,000 teachers with a specialization. This is the public network of teachers in the state of Ceará, of which I am very proud.